Hey, I'm not trying to be condescending, but whatever stupid thing you bicker about with people in your state is not nearly as cool as what we bicker about in our state. In Wyoming, we fight about wolves. That's right, literally, wolves. That's our big divisive issue. Because about 2 decades ago, somebody was like, hey, we should just put more wolves in Wyoming because they probably would want those. And then the wolves, I don't know if you've heard about this, it turns out they eat meat, tons of it. And so they started doing that, and that causes some people in Wyoming to say, literally, all the wolves need to be lined up and just summarily executed. Smoke a pack a day. That's a bumper sticker that we have around here. Because they eat all the animals and they mess with the livestock and they gotta go. Then you got other people who are like, no, the wolves are what Gaia is using to return balance and to create the circle of life and make it whole again. And without the wolves, we can never be complete as a cosmos. And honestly, like, I'm being a little hard on these people. They're both these groups are full of cool, reasonable people who treat other people really well. They just disagree on this one perspective and this one point, and it really does create some palpable division around here. Well, likewise, within Western Christianity, there is a debate about a little thing that revolves around the table of contents of the Bible. And pretty much everybody in Western Christianity agrees that the Old Testament is the Old Testament, no problem. That the contents of the New Testament are the contents of the New Testament, no problem. But the debate centers around this little chunk of books that some people think should go in between, called the Apocrypha. Now, long story short, Roman Catholics say the Apocrypha should be in there. Non-Roman Catholics, specifically Protestants, the people who broke away from the Catholics in the early 1500s, they say, yeah, it shouldn't be in there. All right, turning over my cards here. In this video, I want to talk about why I think they shouldn't be in there, but I also want to try to give a fair treatment to why Catholics think they should be in there. And then because you are smart, and because I'm just some idiot on the internet, you can decide whatever you want to think for yourself. To understand the Apocrypha, we have to understand the Old Testament in general. The Old Testament has a clear narrative arc where everything is made, things fall apart, God chooses to be redemptive anyway, and he chooses to be redemptive by picking a group of people that he's going to make deals with and work with to explain himself, the Jewish people. So he makes a deal with Abraham, he makes a deal with Moses, he makes a deal with David, and these successive deals have God saying, I am going to make myself known. I'm going to bless the whole world through my relationship with you. I'm going to make myself known to the world through my relationship with you. The deal with Moses is a little more conditional. In that one, he basically says, hey, the whole world's going to know that I'm God because if you guys obey me, you're going to be blessed in ways that defy expectation. If you guys disobey me, you're going to be punished profoundly. Either way, everybody will know that I am God. Well, it works out for a while. But the Old Testament tells the story of the Jewish people not keeping up their end of the bargain and God following through on his end of the bargain. And eventually their kingdom collapses. They get hauled into captivity by the Babylonians, and then eventually the Persians take over. And the Old Testament ends on a pretty down note with just a little uptick glimmer of hope that there is some great redemptive thing coming down the road that God is going to do. And so the whole Old Testament, the good stuff, the bad stuff, it all points to Jesus, and that is the narrative trajectory of the New Testament. The Apocrypha has a different narrative trajectory. It largely tells the story of the Jewish nation overcoming their difficult times in captivity and arriving at a place of independence under the rebellion led by the Maccabees. The books have different genres, just like the Old Testament and the New Testament. The books are not super long. It really is a pretty compact read. Some of it is more wisdom, teaching, reflection oriented. Some of it is more narrative, history oriented. Here's how my Catholic friends would defend the inclusion of the Apocrypha in the Bible. First of all, they would say, we don't have to defend it at all. They would say, in our mind, it has been there since the beginning, and it's the Protestants who would need to defend why it's not in there. And as evidence, they would say, go all the way back to the version of the Bible that was floating around at the time of Jesus. This translation of the Jewish Old Testament into Greek was called the Septuagint. And the Septuagint, they would say, included the Apocrypha. Further, my Catholic friends would say that the Apocrypha, in one form or another, though admittedly debated at times, was regarded by many or most as scripture through the early years of Christianity, and there were a few church councils right around 400 AD, and those, in one form or another, basically all affirmed what the Apocrypha was. And then, for the next 1100 years or so, it was basically in circulation until the early 1500s, my Catholic friends would say, when Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation came along, and then Luther, just because he didn't like those books, said they got to go, and Protestants followed suit. My Catholic friends would also say that Protestants were quick to follow suit because it benefited them theologically to reject those apocryphal books. I think that's a pretty fair treatment. Again, I'm not a Roman Catholic, but hopefully that gives you the gist. In the New Testament, you've got quotes from all over the New Testament, direct quotes, but there are no references to the Apocrypha. So the absence of any reference to the Apocrypha means that it's likely Jesus did not view that as Scripture. It's likely the disciples did not view that as Scripture. Further, if you look historically at the trend as these books were debated, and they were debated, you will see that the support chronologically as we move along wanes for viewing the Apocrypha as Scripture. But the Apocrypha hangs around, so does that mean people were lying? No. I think what it means is that the church found value in these books, that it helped get inside the head of where the Jewish people were between the Testaments. It helped to understand philosophy and ideology of the time. It helped connect the dots historically between a story that ends really abruptly in the Old Testament and one that picks up really abruptly in the New Testament. There's a lot of use for it, but there's a lot of use for a lot of books. Doesn't make it Bible. Even Jerome, the really important Catholic saint who translated the Bible from Greek into the Latin Vulgate, that's the Roman Catholic Bible of choice, said the Apocrypha is not Bible. He translated it at the end of his life because he thought it had some value, but went out of his way to say this thing isn't Scripture. Further, Protestants would say that the Apocrypha is never in any way publicly affirmed at a council of the entire church. You had little regional councils that affirmed it at moments, and you certainly had the All-Catholic Council of Trent that happened after the Protestant Reformation, but at no point do you have all of Christendom getting together to sign off on that set of books. Beyond that, the biggest thing that Protestants would point to for why the Apocrypha has no place in the Bible is just the internal content itself. Earlier, I talked about the narrative thrust of the Apocrypha. Well, the Old Testament, it's all messianic. Messianic, that's a fancy word for pointing to the Messiah, pointing to Jesus. Like the whole thing is a setup to get people to recognize it when God makes his big redemptive move and sends Jesus. Well, the Apocrypha doesn't do that. There's nothing that points to Jesus. It's not prophetic in that it describes who Jesus will be or what's going to happen when he gets here. It's a footnote. It's a side note that deals with Jewish nationalism and points towards some evolutions in Jewish faith and particularly political ramifications of their move toward an ultimately successful rebellion. Okay, here's the deal. I know that some of you are watching this video coming strongly from one perspective or another perspective within Christian faith. I know that there are other people who are watching this because you're sizing this thing up for the first time ever and just want the closest thing you can get to an objective take in a reasonable amount of time. Welcome, by the way. I know there are other people here because you're just curious to see our weird history and see our laundry get aired out. And that is kind of what I'm doing here. Like, the fact of the matter is, Christians do not agree on this point. On this particular question, I think it would also be really easy to say, okay, I'm out. If there was any debate or dispute about what ought to be in the Bible, or any group of Christians disagree on this, the whole thing must obviously be a fraud, and it discredits the whole thing. The Bible is a man-made document, and I can't believe that. Okay. I get that impulse. I've felt that impulse. But let's consider the alternative. How would it look to you? How would it look to me as I hope a reasonable, fair-minded person if there was some moment in history where people who wielded the sword and had all power in society got together and said, "This shall be the Bible. We announced it from our secret torture basement, and now we're going to enforce it, and everyone's going to have that for the Bible. And it'll be exactly the same, and no one will disagree about anything involving Christianity ever, and that's just how things are." Well, I can think of a 4-letter word that describes what that kind of religion is. That's a cult. That's a controlling, violence-oriented, manipulative cult. The fact that Christianity continues to thrive, that there continues to be this abundance of agreement. Remember, on 66 of these books, there's no debate. Everybody's on the same page. They're doing great. It's this one singular little bit of disagreement. With that much agreement, golly, I think that's actually kind of a testimony to the validity of the thing. And given the two options, one being centralized control where everybody has to think it or you just can't be here, or what it actually is, I'll take what it actually is. It would be easy for you to be discouraged or to feel like truth is unknowable coming out of this conversation, but I just encourage you to read all this stuff. I'm not going to promise you some magic feeling that you'll have, and when you feel that magic, you'll know this or that must be true. Come on, that's nonsense. Instead, you're smart. You know how to engage your brain, read something critically, compare and contrast two different things, and figure out what makes sense. Last thought. The actual implications of the Apocrypha compared with the New Testament and the Old Testament are minimal. And if you choose to go and read it, I'd invite you to keep an eye out for that. This is not the kind of thing where the central stuff that just must be a certain way for there to be a God or for this to hold together. It's all in the Apocrypha. None of it's in the Apocrypha. It doesn't claim to be so profound. It's additions and bonuses and historical detail and some fill-in-the-gap Jewish stuff. The key theological ideas that Christianity absolutely hinges upon are found in the teachings of Christ in the New Testament, and they're found in the ongoing work of God, though it can be confusing and hard to read, in the Old Testament. At any rate, again, this is one of those things where I think we can get along just fine if we land on different places. There are really smart people who think I'm an idiot on this one, and they may have a point. I think that disagreement is a healthy aspect of faith. At any rate, we're going to keep going with this Nuts and Bolts of the Bible series. I'll get into more of this next time around as we move toward how the translation aspect of this whole thing went. I'm Matt. This is a 10-Minute Bible Hour. We'll see you soon.